Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are in the chapter The Divine and the Undivine on page 405, beginning with the line, "It is not possible then to limit the description." We have read it before. Now
we
we'll
have
go
read it
line by
before, so
line.
we'll go sentence by sentence.
Good.
Before we start reading each sentence, we must remember that Srimad has discussed earlier, there are many philosophies in the world which say that all the ugliness and the suffering and the evil that exists in the world cannot have been made by the divine. Because the divine is pure, he is gentle, he is good. How can he create evil? Okay, so this is one side. All that is good is created by the divine, and all that is bad or evil, suffering, death is not created by the divine. There are many philosophies which say that. Manichaeanism and many other philosophies are there.
Well, Christianity itself.
Yeah, that's right, Christianity itself also. But the Vedanta has a courage to say that everything is only divine. There is nothing that is not divine. Then how do you explain this suffering and this death? That's because of the limitation of your own sense knowledge. You go beyond sense knowledge, you will see it in a different way. And there is a justification for it. And there is a gradation. From the highest to the lowest, there is a gradation. The light, if you take only light, the light at its brightest on the top, and when it keeps coming down for manifestation, it becomes dimmer and dimmer and dimmer until finally it ends in total darkness of the inconscience. That also is the divine. The divine here is there, but he is veiled, he is hiding behind the forms. But there are no forms and there is no hiding. He is absolutely blazingly seen in light and power and bliss.
But in the darkness, is there not also light?
No, it is there in potential. Like the seed contains a tree, but you don't see the tree in the seed.
But Sri Aurobindo he writes, our sense, by its incapacity, has invented darkness.
As in?
Has invented darkness.
Yeah.
In truth, there is only light.
Yes.
But it is a light either above or below our poor human vision's limited range.
Because you can say that darkness is also light. There is no fundamental existence for darkness. It's a grade of light.
Exactly.
If you take it in this way, that if you let's take a 1,000-watt bulb, okay? You start dimming it. It is still light, but dimmer. Even when it becomes 0 watts, okay, it is still light, but it has reached the bottom. So you feel it is darkness, but darkness doesn't exist by itself. It is a product of the light. It's a grade of light. You have to see it in that way.
Very good.
Yeah, that's how you have to see it. So with that introduction, divine and undivine, there is really nothing undivine. It's only a relative at which level you are standing. Suppose you are standing here, what is above you, superior to you, is the divine. What is below you is, in a sense, undivine. But there is nothing really essentially undivine.
In the lower grades of consciousness.
Yes, even the lowest is not undivine.
Yeah.
It is, the divine wants to see himself in light, fine. But he is so free that he wants to see himself also in darkness. Who is going to say you should not? He is himself deciding that I want to see myself in darkness.
So these almost impossible things that we hear about torture.
That's an eternal problem you have.
That's my problem.
Okay. So there's another way of putting it which is more not so dramatic. Okay, he wants to see himself as one. Only he exists. But he also wants to see himself as the many. So torture and all these things come when there is a veiling of the divine. He veils his light, he veils his power, he veils his consciousness and his substance. So, at which level are you standing? That's the whole point. Okay, or to put the problem of your torture and evil and suffering. In fact, that's what we are going to read. But we can read it this way. There is the manifestation. There is the objective world. Okay? At the highest level, light. We'll take only light. We won't take power and consciousness and bliss. We won't take. Just to explain. We take light. That light is graded. When it comes down, it becomes darkness. Okay? Now, this is objectively, it exists. Whether you exist or not, or I exist or not, it exists. Now, if there's a consciousness which is experiencing this grades of light. What is that consciousness? It is graded. So, if you are at this level, our normal level, nature has given you consciousness senses to experience that light. I am speaking only of the light, okay? So, nature has given you senses. But at this level, the senses are limited. So, if you want to go and see things at a higher level, you have to change your senses. You have to change your instruments of knowledge. It's very simple. If you take scientific example, you see, I am seeing things now, but if I want to see things at a microscopic level, I have to use a microscope. I can't use my eyes. I have to change my instruments of knowledge. But if I use a microscope, I can see things which I can't see with my normal eyes. So it depends at which level you are. Now I want to see the largest stars. I can't use a microscope. I can't use my eyes. I have to use another instrument of knowledge. And what is that instrument of knowledge? A telescope. So exactly in the spiritual field also, if you are at this physical level, you are using your senses. But if you go to a higher level of consciousness, physical senses are not necessary. You can use subtle senses. That will give you much more knowledge. Even if you go higher up, light becomes the instrument of knowledge. Intuition becomes the instrument of knowledge as you go on. Finally, the knowledge doesn't exist at all because you identify yourself with the Supreme. You become the light. So there is the objective world, there is a consciousness which is experiencing this with different instruments of knowledge.
Okay, so what about the Romanian fellow who is being tortured?
Yeah.
And Sri Aurobindo comes to him
Yes.
and tells him how to go out of his body.
Yes.
All right.
So what's the
So
question?
what of those who are not able to go out of their body and have
But
to
you can do
experience
if you
that?
put sufficient effort into it. And you must know how to do it. And all that has been already explored in the Vedic periods. There is a whole chapter in Life Divine, Methods of Vedantic Knowledge. So if you want to have the knowledge of these higher grades, you go into yourself, not outside. Science uses senses and goes outside into the physical world. Vedanta doesn't use senses, it goes inside. So, again we come back to the same idea that there is the infinite, but there is also the finite. The finite contains the infinite. You are the finite. If you want to know the infinite, don't waste your time going out into the infinite. Go into yourself. It's easier. Once you have gone into yourself, the finite, you know the infinite. That which being known, everything is known. Okay? The story is illustrated very well by the two sons of Shiva. Okay? So Shiva says to his two sons, Ganesh and Kartik, go around the world and come back to me. I want to see which of you comes quicker. So Kartik starts going around the world. Okay, he is going out into the universe. Ganesh says, you are the universe in miniature. You are that's the infinite, but you are also, you may be finite, but you are the infinite. So, the 4 lines of Blake again. So, he just goes around his parents. He says, I have gone around the world. So, this is the truth. It depends at which level you are. So, depending on which level you are, you will see things in a different way. You will see evil also, you will start seeing in a different way. Again, we can also give the example of the wind. Okay, let's take the wind.
Yeah.
a soft, sweet wind, okay, is very pleasant to you. But that wind becomes a storm, violent storm, which you say evil. I'm just giving you this example, but it's the same.
Yeah.
If I pat your cheek very lovingly, it is very pleasant. But if I give you one slap, it is unpleasant. But both are just movement of my hand. One is a gentle movement, one is a harsh movement. If I go up to a higher level, I see both the soft wind and the storm as just wind energy. I change my view altogether.
Yeah.
That is the explanation for the
True.
torture and the suffering and the
Yes.
evil, and that's what we are going to read today. Okay, so it is not possible then to limit the description of our and the world's undivine imperfection solely to moral evil or sensational suffering. We'll stop here because in the previous para I just told you that when you think of divine and undivine, the most striking thing in the physical world is the suffering, death, and evil. That is undivine. You can't. The other thing, if you are ignorant, it's not that striking. Okay, there are people with different intelligences, so it's all right. But evil is something you can't bear. I have a friend in Corsica who comes and she has the same problem. And she tells me, I just cannot accept that the divine can create suffering here. And suffering is there. How can it be? What is the solution to this problem? So you have to rise to another level of consciousness. You will start seeing the same thing in a different way. It will not appear to you like that. It will appear to you just as a neutral wind with different velocities. That's all. So he's saying that we can't reduce the undivine to moral evil and sensational suffering only. There are many other things also which are graded downwards. Okay, there is more in the world enigma than their double problem, for they are only two strong results of a common principle. It is the general principle of imperfection that we have to admit and consider. Not only evil and suffering. So he'll tell you what those things are, okay? It's a general principle of imperfection that we have to admit and consider. If we look closely at this general imperfection, we shall see that it consists first in a limitation in us of the divine elements, which robs them of their divinity. Then, in a various, many branching distortion, a perversion, a contrary turn, a falsifying departure from some ideal truth of being. So if you look, there's a diminution. Diminution is the problem. And the one becoming the many. When the one becomes the many, there is a limitation of consciousness, limitation of force, limitation of ananda, everything. Okay, so to our minds, now when he talks of our minds, our ignorant, limited minds as we know it at level 1. Okay, so to our minds which do not possess that truth but can conceive it, we can imagine what it could be. This departure presents itself either as a state from which we have lapsed spiritually or as a possibility or promise which we cannot fulfill. You can think of it in that way. Cannot realize because it exists only as an ideal. Okay, it's a full stop. So he's saying, at our level, we cannot know God, but we can conceive of God. He is omnipotence, He is omniscience, omnipresence. We can think of it. But can we reach Him? You can say, I will never be able to reach Him, or maybe I can. Okay? He's saying, as a state to which we have lapsed spiritually. So we have, that's a theory of Genesis also. Adam and Eve have been banished from the kingdom. They have fallen down here because they have disobeyed the Lord. Okay, so it's a descent, lapse spiritually, or a possibility or promise which we cannot fulfill. You can see that's what the materialist would say. The materialist doesn't even believe in God. But those who believe in God, they may still have this philosophy. They Um, there's a whole philosophy which says that there is nothing you can do about it. The world is like this. Existentialism. Okay? Yeah. You can do nothing about it. You have to accept what the imperfection is. But it's not true that you have to accept. But existentialism can't conceive of something higher. So they say you accept meekly what is there. Okay? So cannot realize because it exists only as an ideal. So there has been either a lapse of the inner spirit from a greater consciousness and knowledge, delight, love, beauty, power and capacity, harmony and good, or else there is a failure of our struggling nature and impotence to achieve what we instinctively see to be divine and desirable. So there has been a fall. So we have fallen from that state and come down. Okay, so we have to explain how the fall actually manifestation implies fall, but that's again we have to go into another direction, so we won't do that now. Okay, so
But let me ask you then. When you entered the spiritual planes, how did you see torture and evil?
no, I haven't. I'm ignorant.
I tried to trap
I
you.
only mental knowledge.
I tried to trap you.
I've read Sri Aurobindo enough to understand mentally, but I have not experienced it. There are people who have experienced it in the ashram. Of
Yeah,
course they have.
Sure.
But
Okay.
so there has either been a lapse of the inner spirit from a greater consciousness and knowledge, delight, love, beauty, power. All these things also there is a diminution. Not only suffering and evil, but also knowledge, delight, love, beauty, power, capacity, harmony and good. Or else there is a failure of our struggling nature and impotence to achieve what we instinctively see to be divine and desirable. We can imagine that yes, there is a divine, but you can have different philosophies. Okay, the Vedanta says yes, you can become that. Existentialism says no possibility. Materialism says there is nothing higher than this. So there's so many different philosophies. You can conceive of it. Okay, so if we penetrate to the cause or the fall or the failure, the cause of the fall or the failure, we shall find that all proceeds from the one primal fact of our being, consciousness, force, experience of things, represent I'm skipping the
Parenthetical
phrase, okay? I read that sentence again without reading the parenthetical phrase.
Okay.
Then we'll come back to the parenthetical phrase. If we penetrate to the cause of the fall or the failure, okay, we shall find that all proceeds from the one primal fact that our being, consciousness, force, experience of things represent a principle or an effective phenomenon of division or rupture in the unity of the divine existence. He repeats this everywhere. The one becoming the many. This is the basic problem. Division. So that which is full gets divided here. So when you are divided here and there is a separation, I don't feel that I am you, you are in ignorance. And that is the cause of the whole problem. Okay? So if you want to get back to the divine state, lose your sense of separation. So you have to go to the cosmic consciousness where you see the oneness of everything. My soul is the same as everybody else's soul. Then it's possible to understand in a different way. Okay, so that's what it is. The main problem is the division, the fall. Okay, so now I'll read the parenthetical phrase. Not in their very self, but in their surface pragmatic nature. So that's the trick. So what you said, there is no darkness at all, everywhere there is light. It is true, but there is a surface form and there is a deep inside which is the truth. So the divine is here, but he has veiled himself. Now if you ask why has he veiled himself, that's again another question. Okay. Very briefly we can say that manifestation implies limitation. and manifestation implies form. If there is no form, there is no manifestation. Form necessarily implies limitation. And limitation of consciousness is unconsciousness. Limitation of knowledge is ignorance. Limitation of ananda can go down to even suffering. Limitation of good can become evil. Apparently, but not truly. Apparently. Okay? So, yeah, not in their very self, but in their surface pragmatic nature. Note the word surface pragmatic nature. Pragmatic means everything that is there in time and space. Limited. There is absolute stability at the higher level. There is no stability here, there is only movement. So this is in time and space. There is no time and no space. That's permanent, and here everything is transient. So in this transient world, yes, there is a division and a apparent hiding of the unity of God, the divine. That's what he's saying. So this division becomes, in its inevitable practical effect, a limitation of the divine consciousness and knowledge, the divine delight and beauty, the divine power and capacity, the divine harmony and good. There is a limitation of completeness and wholeness, a blindness in our vision of these things. That's the whole problem. Blindness in our vision of these things. Change your vision, the blindness will go. A lameness in our following of them. A lameness in our following of them. He'll tell you something very interesting later on. In our experience of them, a fragmentation, a diminution of power and intensity, a lowering of quality, the mark of a descent from spiritual heights, or else of a consciousness emerging from the insensible, neutral monotone of the inconscience. The intensities which are normal and natural on the higher ranges are in us lost or toned down so as to harmonize with the blacks and the greys of our material existence. So, the question can come up, why is he veiling himself? Okay. So very briefly, we said a lot of discussion has to be there, but very briefly, he wants to see, the divine wants to see, he is only one. But he wants to see what are the possibilities in him. These are all only ways of talking. Because if you go down to, you can always argue against this mental argument. But still, it gives an idea. The divine wants to see himself as the many. He wants to manifest what is there inside him as seed. But he doesn't want to be satisfied only with the seed. He wants to see the tree. He wants to see what are the capacities that can be developed and what can be manifested. So he starts manifesting himself. Whatever is there in me, I want to see what is being manifested. So manifestation is form. Again, we come back to the same argument. And form is limitation. Again, to understand form is limitation, take a huge amount of clay, okay? It is formless. But pots and pans are potentially there in that clay, but I don't see it. So now the potter, who is the divine, wants to make pots and pans. He makes pots and pans. So when you make a pot and pan, the forms in the physical world, you have limited that clay. So manifestation implies limitation. It implies form, and form implies limitation. And limitation automatically, that's what he's saying, inevitably, it leads to limitation of consciousness, limitation of knowledge, limitation of power, limitation of bliss.
So when Sri Aurobindo kept telling Mother that the earth was not ready yet, ready.
That's right.
But he came down, and Mother came down.
To make it ready.
To make it ready, exactly.
To make it ready.
Exactly.
And they did that.
Yeah.
This is also another thing. There is the time spirit. There is a time spirit for everything. It's not yet ready. There is a time spirit. When the time spirit is ready, the next stage of evolution can come. The German word is there, na? I think it is Zeitgeist or something like that.
Zeitgeist,
Time
no?
spirit.
Zeitgeist. Yeah.
Zeitgeist, okay. So time spirit is very important. Sri Aurobindo speaks about it a lot. So, so that had appeared in 1956, so they were able to bring it down. Otherwise, it wasn't ready yet. Okay, so there arises too, by secondary ulterior effect, a perversion of these highest things. There's a perversion, there's a twist. In our limited mentality, unconsciousness and wrong consciousness intervene. Ignorance covers our whole nature, and by the misapplication or misdirection of an imperfect will and knowledge, by automatic reactions of our diminished consciousness force and the inept poverty of our substance, contradictions of the divine elements are formed. Incapacity, inertia, falsehood, error, pain, and grief, wrongdoing, discord, evil. There is too, now this is something which is very interesting he's saying now, look carefully. Psychology. There is too always somewhere hidden in ourselves, nursed in our recesses, even when not overtly felt in the conscious nature, even when rejected by the parts of us which these things torture, an attachment to the experience of division. There is something in us which is wanting this division, a clinging to the divided way of being which prevents the excision of these unhappinesses or their rejection and removal. So there is something in man in the fallen condition where he doesn't want to change. That's the tamasic principle. He wants always stability and permanence of something. So he doesn't, if light comes in, he doesn't want the light. Somewhere in him there is something, I don't want the light. Okay, people have experienced this. Okay, so there's always it's very interesting. Ramakrishna has a very interesting example for this. A lady who sells fish, okay, she is all the time used to the fish. Now, for someone who is not doing that, fish smell is horrible. It will disturb him like hell. But this lady will not be able to sleep without that fish smell. So there is something which you want, this limitation. It's a very interesting image given.
Yeah.
You want your imperfection, you don't want. And this is quite common, you can see also sometimes when someone is in depression, okay, and a friend goes and says, come on, you must get out of this depression. Let's go and do this. Let's go and watch a movie, or let's go and do this. They don't want. They'll resist. No, leave me alone. Not everybody, but something is there in you. That's what Surendra is saying.
Yeah.
So he's saying, even when rejected by the parts which these things torture, an attachment to the experience of division, a clinging to the divided way of being, which prevents the excision of these unhappinesses or their rejection and removal. Something is there in us which you don't want to change.
I'm in love with my sorrow idea. Yes.
Yeah. For since the principle of consciousness, force and ananda is at the root of all manifestation, nothing can endure if it has not a will in our nature, a sanction of the Purusha, a sustained pleasure in some part of the being, even though it be a secret or a perverse pleasure, to keep it in continuance. So, but what the divine wants, it will exist. So you can't say that the divine doesn't want unhappiness here. And how to explain this? Because, again we can come back to that. The three principles of Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Tamas is the principle of stability, no change. And that is essential in the physical world because your form must be stable. If you are not stable, how will I know who you are? You are going on changing. To whom am I talking? I am not talking to Narad. Narad is now he becomes something else. So, stability of forms is important. What does stability of forms imply? It implies a permanence of the static condition. And if you are in ignorance, the principle of static condition applies. You don't want to change. That's because of the tamasic principle. We have come to the end of the para. We stop here today. So it's very interesting what he's saying. There is a fall and a descent. It is divine, but it's a different grade of divinity. Okay, but there is a veiling, and the truth is also here, but it is veiled. There, the divine is found without veils. The blazing light, and here the darkness. He has hidden himself. Why he has done that again is another, because it's one of the possibilities of the infinite. When the divine is creating infinitely, all the possibilities have to be taken into account. So you have to create everything. Just to take one example of the light, okay? I have got the full power to create light, okay? I create light of a 500 watt bulb, okay? 500 watt bulb. I can create 1000 watt bulb. I can create 2000 watt bulb. But what prevents me from stopping 100 watt bulb, 50 watt bulb? So I'll create infinitely. I'll create a 0 watt bulb. That's one of the possibilities. That's another way of looking at it. We stop here today.